Most people believe their life is the result of big decisions, a career choice, a relationship, a single moment of courage or failure. But what if that belief is quietly destroying your potential? What if your future is not shaped by dramatic breakthroughs, but by the tiny behaviors you repeat when no one is watching? This is the psychological core of Atomic Habits by James Clear. Not a productivity book, not a motivational slogan. It's a study of how human behavior actually works and why small actions, repeated consistently, end up controlling wealth, health, identity, and power.
Today, we're not summarizing this book. We're dissecting the psychological machinery behind it, the forces that run your habits, even when you think you're in control. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. The myth of overnight change. Here's the first uncomfortable truth. Human beings massively overestimate the power of sudden transformation and underestimate the danger of slow, invisible decline. We love stories of overnight success, a viral moment, a sudden breakthrough, a dramatic before and after. But psychology tells a darker story. Real change doesn't arrive loudly. It creeps in quietly. One missed workout doesn't ruin your health. One unnecessary expense doesn't destroy your finances. One distracted hour doesn't kill your ambition. But repeated daily, they compound. James Clear frames this idea through a powerful mental model. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. And compound interest is brutal in both directions. Just as money grows exponentially over time, behavior does too. This explains something most people never understand. Why smart people stay stuck. Why motivated people burn out. Why potential goes unrealized. Because they're focused on goals, while ignoring the systems quietly shaping their behavior.
Let's slow down here. Most self-help advice tells you to set better goals, earn more, lose weight, read more books. But goals don't change behavior. Systems do. From a psychological standpoint, goals are temporary dopamine triggers. They create excitement and then disappear. Once the goal is achieved, motivation collapses. Once it's missed, shame takes over. This is why goal-obsessed people often feel stuck in cycles of hype and burnout. James Clear makes a subtle but powerful distinction. Goals define outcomes. Systems define identity-driven behavior. And identity is where habits truly live.
Here's the psychological shift most people never make. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. Read that again, slowly. If you believe, deep down, I'm not the kind of person who sticks with things, no productivity hack will save you. If your self-image says, I'm bad with money, every financial plan will quietly fail. Your habits are not about what you want. They're about who you believe you are. James Clear reframes habit change as an identity evolution. Not, I want to read more, but I am the kind of person who reads daily. Not, I want to be wealthy,
But I am someone who manages money deliberately. Each small habit becomes a vote for the type of person you're becoming. Psychologically, this is massive because the human brain is wired for consistency. Once you act in alignment with an identity, breaking that behavior creates internal discomfort. This is how habits lock in, not through discipline, but through self-concept. Why small habits feel useless but aren't. There's a reason people abandon good habits early. The brain is terrible at sensing slow progress. When you start saving money, the account barely moves. When you start exercising, the mirror doesn't change. When you start learning, competence feels invisible. This creates what James Clear calls the valley of disappointment. Effort is high, results are low, and motivation collapses. Psychologically, this is where most people quit. But this phase is not failure, it's latency. Progress is accumulating beneath the surface.
just like ice warming from 25 degrees to 31 degrees. Nothing appears to change, until suddenly, at 32 degrees, it melts. The habit didn't fail. The timeline fooled you.
Now, here's where Atomic Habits quietly destroys the willpower myth. Most people think behavior change is about trying harder, but psychology says otherwise. Your environment shapes your behavior far more than motivation ever will. You don't repeatedly check your phone because you're weak. You do it because it's within arm's reach. You don't overeat because you lack discipline. You do it because food cues surround you. James Clear emphasizes a simple truth. Behavior is a response to the environment. Change the environment, and behavior changes automatically. This is why the most effective habit builders don't rely on self-control. They redesign their surroundings.
They make good habits obvious and bad habits invisible. This isn't self-help, it's behavioral engineering. Where this becomes dangerous, in a good way. Once you understand this, something unsettling happens. You realize your life is already being engineered, just not by you. Apps are designed to hijack attention. Food is engineered for overconsumption. Social systems reward distraction, not depth. Habits aren't neutral. They're directional. And if you're not deliberately shaping them, something else is. This is where Atomic Habits stops being a habit book and becomes a power book. Because whoever controls your habits controls your future.
In the next section, we'll break down the 4 psychological laws of habit formation and how they can be used to build wealth, focus, and mental leverage, or quietly destroy them. Let's continue exactly where we left off. If habits are the invisible force shaping your future, then the next question is obvious. How are habits actually formed? Not philosophically, not motivationally, but psychologically. James Clear reduces habit formation to 4 laws, not as rules to follow, but as patterns the human brain already obeys. Once you understand these laws, you stop fighting your behavior and start directing it. Law 1. Make it obvious. The cue controls the action. Every habit begins with a cue, not intention, not motivation. A cue. Something in your environment triggers a behavior automatically. Your phone lights up. You check it. You see a couch. You sit. You feel stress. You scroll, snack, or distract. The brain is a pattern recognition machine. Once it links a cue to a reward, conscious thought is bypassed. This explains why trying to remember rarely works. If the cue isn't visible, the habit doesn't exist psychologically. That's why the most powerful habit builders don't rely on memory. They design cues into their environment. Books placed on a desk, not a shelf. Water bottles within reach. Gym clothes laid out the night before. This isn't laziness, it's intelligence. You're not motivating yourself. You're prompting yourself.
There's an even deeper layer here. The strongest cues aren't physical, they're identity-based. I'm the kind of person who, I don't do that. This is just who I am. When a behavior aligns with identity, no reminder is needed. This is why people who become runners don't struggle to run, or why disciplined investors don't debate every purchase. They're not making decisions, they're expressing identity. And this is where habits stop feeling like effort. Law 2. Make it attractive. Dopamine drives behavior. The brain does not repeat habits because they're logical. It repeats them because they're emotionally rewarding. Dopamine spikes before the reward, at anticipation. This is crucial. Your brain is constantly scanning for what feels good and avoiding what feels painful. So if a habit feels boring, restrictive, or punishing, it will fail long term. This is why people can't discipline their way into consistency. James Clear introduces a powerful concept here: temptation bundling. You attach something pleasurable to something beneficial.
You only listen to your favorite podcasts while exercising. You enjoy premium coffee while working deeply. You turn saving money into a visible scorecard. This reframes habits psychologically. You're not forcing behavior, you're rewarding it. Why most good habits fail emotionally? Here's the mistake most people make. They associate growth with suffering. Exercise equals pain. Learning equals effort. Discipline equals deprivation. But the brain rebels against punishment. High performers understand this intuitively. They make progress feel satisfying. They track streaks. They celebrate consistency, not outcomes.
The emotional reward isn't the result. It's the act of showing up. This is how habits survive long enough to compound. Law 3. Make it easy. Friction shapes behavior. This law is uncomfortable for the ego because it reveals a harsh truth. Humans do what's convenient, not what's important, not what's logical. Effort is the enemy of consistency. The brain evolved to conserve energy, so it always chooses the path of least resistance. James Clear doesn't argue for more discipline. He argues for less friction. Lower the barrier to starting. 1 page, not a chapter. 5 minutes, not an hour. 1 expense tract, not a full budget.
The goal isn't to finish, it's to show up. Once you start, momentum takes over. The 2-minute rule, psychological Trojan horse. This is where the 2-minute rule becomes powerful. Any habit should start in under 2 minutes, not because 2 minutes matter, but because identity does. You're not trying to get fit. You're trying to become the kind of person who doesn't skip workouts. You're not trying to build wealth. You're trying to become someone who respects small financial decisions. 2 minutes remove psychological resistance. And once resistance is gone, consistency wins. Law 4. Make it satisfying. The brain remembers rewards. This final law explains why habits stick or disappear. The brain remembers what feels good immediately. Long-term rewards don't motivate behavior. Immediate feedback does. This is why bad habits are so powerful. They feel good now and cost later. Good habits often feel neutral now and reward later. James Clear flips this imbalance. He emphasizes immediate reinforcement. Visual progress, habit trackers, clear evidence of consistency. When the brain sees progress, it wants to repeat the behavior. Satisfaction locks the habit in. Now pause. Everything we just discussed can be used against you.
Social media makes distraction obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. Consumer culture does the same with spending. Modern environments are optimized for bad habits. This isn't accidental, which means habit mastery isn't optional anymore. It's defensive. In the next part, we'll explore how these laws apply to wealth, focus, power, and long-term success, and how small behavioral shifts create disproportionate life outcomes.
Let's go deeper. Once you understand the psychology of habits, you start seeing life differently. Success stops looking like talent, or luck, or motivation. It starts looking like a system of invisible behaviors, repeated daily, that compound quietly.
But psychologically, wealth is built the same way habits are. Small, repeated financial behaviors, executed consistently over long periods.
Tracking expenses, avoiding lifestyle inflation, delaying gratification slightly more than average. None of these are dramatic. That's why most people ignore them. But compound interest doesn't reward drama. It rewards consistency. James Clear's core insight applies perfectly here. Your daily financial habits matter more than your financial goals. Wanting to be rich doesn't change behavior. Building the identity of someone who manages money intentionally does. Identity-based wealth thinking. Here's the subtle psychological shift wealthy people make. They don't ask, "What can I afford?" They ask, "What would a financially disciplined person do here?" This identity-based question changes everything. It removes emotion from decisions, it reduces impulsivity, it creates internal consistency. When saving and investing become part of who you are, they no longer feel like sacrifice. They feel normal. And normal behaviors compound. Focus, the rare habit that creates power. Now let's talk about something more valuable than money: attention. In modern psychology, attention is currency, and most people are bankrupt. Distraction is not a personal flaw, it's an environmental default. Your phone, notifications, algorithms, all designed to fracture focus. James Clear's habit framework reveals why focus is so rare.
Focus requires friction for distractions and ease for deep work. High performers don't resist distraction, they eliminate cues. Phones in another room, notifications disabled, clear time blocks for thinking. This isn't discipline, it's design. The habit of saying no. There's a habit most people never build: saying no. Every yes is a trade-off. Every commitment consumes time and attention. But socially, saying no feels uncomfortable. Psychologically, it creates friction. So people default to yes and wonder why they're overwhelmed. James Clear reframes this beautifully. Every habit is a vote. Every yes is a vote for one identity and against another. High-leverage individuals protect their habits fiercely. They understand that saying no today preserves freedom tomorrow. Now, here's where most people fail. Not at the start, but in the middle, when the habit becomes boring. Progress slows, excitement fades, novelty disappears. This is the real test of mastery. James Clear highlights a critical psychological truth. Professionals stick to the schedule, amateurs let emotions decide. The difference between success and stagnation is the ability to perform when motivation is gone. This is where identity does the heavy lifting. You don't act because you feel like it. You act because this is who you are. Systems create freedom, not restriction. Many people resist habits because they fear rigidity. They think structure kills creativity. But psychology shows the opposite. Structure reduces decision fatigue. It frees mental energy. It creates space for creativity and strategy. When habits handle the basics, health, money, learning, your mind is free to think bigger. This is why powerful people obsess over systems, not because they're controlling, but because they value freedom. Now, let's address something uncomfortable. Bad habits rarely destroy lives dramatically. They erode them quietly. Scrolling instead of thinking, spending instead of investing, reacting instead of planning. No single decision ruins you, but repeated daily, they create a life you didn't choose. James Clear's message here is subtle but serious. You're always becoming something. The question is, are you choosing it? Where this all converges. At this point, the message should be clear. Habits are not about productivity. They're about identity, control, and trajectory. They decide who you become, what you tolerate, what compounds in your favor.
In the final part, we'll slow down. We'll connect the psychological dots. And we'll end with a calm, grounded wind down, so you can apply these insights without overwhelm.
Let's slow the pace now. If there's one psychological takeaway from Atomic Habits, it's not about doing more. It's about becoming different, quietly, gradually, deliberately. Your habits are not just actions, they are signals. Signals you send to yourself every day about who you are and what you value. Small choices are not small. Most people dismiss small decisions because they feel insignificant. One skipped workout, one impulsive purchase, one distracted hour. But psychologically, these moments matter because they reinforce identity. You are always casting votes, not for outcomes, but for character. And identity compounds faster than results.
Intensity feels productive. Consistency feels boring. But the brain trusts repetition. Repeated behavior becomes self-image. Self-image becomes automatic behavior. This is why the most powerful changes often look unimpressive from the outside. Quiet routines, simple systems, non-dramatic discipline. This is not weakness, it's leverage. The ultimate reframe. Here's the deepest reframe James Clear offers, and one most people overlook. You are not trying to change your life. You are trying to change what you do when no one is watching, because that is where identity is built.
Not in public, not in motivation, but in private repetition. So instead of asking, "What do I want to achieve?" ask this instead. What kind of person would naturally achieve this? And what small habit would prove I am becoming them? Then start there. Small, almost laughably small, and repeat it. Habits shape identity. Identity shapes behavior. Behavior shapes destiny. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but inevitably. If you control your habits, you control the direction of your life. And direction, over time, beats speed. Always.